Well, good afternoon to everyone in attendance and those that are following us online. So this is today's meeting of the Service Manager Joint Liaison Committee, today being Wednesday, October 23rd. We need to adopt the agenda. Do I have a mover and a... Do I have the documents for that? Do I need documents for that? I'm confused again today.
Yeah, we usually approve the adoption of the agenda.
Moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by
Councillor McDonald.
Councillor McDonald, thank you. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none. The adoption of the minutes. Everyone's had a chance to read the minutes. Any issues with that? Yes, Councillor Warden-elect Lang.
I'm not officially, I'm just a guest. And I was a guest last time, but they did put down that I moved the minutes, and if I did, I likely shouldn't have, because I'm not part of that committee, I'm just a guest.
Already. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Thank you very much for pointing that out. We were so comfortable with you, we thought you were part of the group. So the adoption of the minutes as amended, a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor McDonald, or the Warden McDonald, and Councillor Savarin. So we have two presentations in front of us. The City of Cornwall, Ontario Works, Children's Services, Community Housing Services, Glen Stordun Lodge Paramedic Services. And I think we're going to call upon, I see that we have Melissa Morgan and
Lisa Smith.
Lisa with us. Will it be Lisa presenting that, Madam CAO?
It will be her and myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
We have two Madam CIOs now.
Oh. Well, thank you. My apologies.
Thank you. To you through the chair. Ms. Smith is here to present the Human Services Department, which includes Ontario Works, Children's Services, and Community Housing. She will also present Glen Stordun Lodge to the committee. And any questions perhaps that you'd like to direct to me, I'm here to answer those for you.
Excellent. If everyone is ready to begin, I'm ready to start. Okay, excellent. So the first budget that you will see in your package is for the Ontario Works area of human services and long-term care. Just as a reminder, Ontario Works ensures that residents of our community receive Ontario Works income. It's also intended to create opportunities to support and stabilize individuals towards life stabilization to assist them to achieve full potential. So it does provide income benefits, but it also does provide other services around life stabilization as well. So moving into the budget specifically, when you look at the salaries and benefits area, increases in this area are largely due to contractual obligations, an ongoing response to support asylum claimants who have settled in the community. At this time, we had previously added 3 staff to be able to support asylum seekers. We now have retained 2 of those 3 staff, and that's just a bit of a reflection in the change of the needs of those claimants and their settlement into our community. Purchase of goods, the decreases in this area is largely due to trend, anticipated client needs, and program delivery changes. Under services and rents, decreases in expenditures is primarily due to program delivery changes. However, to support the approach towards cost savings to the municipal tax base, we did make changes and cuts in other areas just to be able to, again, mitigate the impact on our tax base. Under financials and transfer, we have increased client benefit costs as a response to changes in caseloads. So again, that just kind of matches what we see in terms of what's happening for clients. We used our projections from 2024 to establish these expenses. In regards to revenue, it's important to note that the funding primarily is received from the Ministry of Community, Children, Community, and Social Services for this area. The cost of OW benefit administration is cost shared with MCSS and the service manager, which is technically City of Cornwall and the United Counties. The city did receive an increase in administration funding in 2025, so we were able to use that to also help offset cost. And then there is a contribution from reserves that has helped, again, to offset the cost for OW and the impact of that delivery towards the tax base. I'll move into Children's Services. So Children's Services, again, is in place to help to ensure that families have access to a range of quality childcare and early years programs. It supports the creation of new licensed childcare spaces and enables parents to go to work or school while their children benefit from quality early learning programs. When we look at the budget, again, under salaries and benefits, increases in this area, again, are a result of contractual obligations. Under purchases and goods, increases are due to a realignment of general department expenses, as well as the continuation of our ECE recruitment campaign. Services and rents, changes are a direct result here of that continued implementation of CWELC, and there also was some realignment of accounts to better accommodate current ministry funding structure. So again, changes there are primarily coming out of program delivery, as well as just some changes in essentially financial reporting for better alignment. Under financials and transfers, there is a small increase there. This is basically in place to reflect the addition of some equipment purchases for ITT and software requirements for the staff who work in children's services. There is also, under contribution from reserve, you'll see that we did, again, transfer funds in from our reserve to offset the cost to the municipal tax base, which now brought the children's services reserve to zero. For revenue in this area, again, it's primarily funded through Ministry of Education. They're advising there's a new funding formula that's going to be in effect on January 1st of 2025. We have little to no detail on that at this time. So what we have done is we basically created our 2025 budget off of early indications we're receiving from the ministry, as well as what we saw last year. So at this point, that is our best approach, considering there's no additional detail from the ministry yet on how that funding will be used. Distributed. I would say, though, generally the team in this area did budget conservatively. So again, trying to very much be cognizant of something that's realistic, knowing that those details are still forthcoming. And just as a reminder, the Canada-wide Early Learning Child Care Program, I think I got all the letters, has no impact to the municipal contribution to the budget, right? So that's primarily coming from our provincial funding source. So I'll move into housing services, and once I'm done with housing services, I'll take a break, and then for questions, and then we can move into the lodge if that works for everyone. So the thing to note about housing services, it's broken into two primary areas. Housing programs is basically our ministry-funded programs under Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Programs in that area are primarily delivered by the staff at the office at 340 Pitt Street. And again, this is really focused on housing stability and homelessness programs. Housing services is in place to actually provide community housing directly to residents, as well as look at the development of affordable housing in our area. So again, that is delivered out of our 550 9th Street office, so in the main floor of the newly constructed building on the corner of 9th and McConnell. Housing Services directly administers 1,300 units of housing across 23 properties that are located in the counties and the City of Cornwall. Moving into the budget, under salaries and benefits, again, increases in this area are due to contractual obligations for staff. For purchase of goods, again, expenses were generally held to trend. The increases are a result of increased operational costs for housing services. So there's impacts, just coming out of the general cost of business. We've also added some costs for the staff offices that will be located at Massey Commons, and additional operational costs for the property that's under construction in Morrisburg that's slated to be completed in summer of 2025. For services and rents, again, increases are reflecting the cost to deliver ministry-funded programs to match funding levels. So again, as we will occasionally move that MMH funding through to different expense lines just based on what the client delivery expectations are in the given year. Increased expenditures in the area support the ongoing implementation of our winter housing solution, encampment response, and improved efficiencies and our approach to maintenance properties. So it would be the three primary areas where we had to do some cost increase. Other increases reflect the rising cost of operational items required to maintain community housing properties. So that could be items such as snow contracts and matters such as that. Under financing, LTD principal and interest, the overall decrease here was due to the end of the mortgage we held on Walton Street. So I think you've probably heard us speak before about how the properties are coming to the end of their mortgages and the impact that's having. So they have a cost savings, but at the same time, there's also sometimes cost impacts as well. This has been, so that decrease was offset by the addition of the loan to our Morrisburg bill, as well as we have taken the principal and interest payments for all our housing loans for 2025 out of our housing reserve. So again, I think you recall I came here and I said I think it was close to a little over $1 million impact from those end of mortgages, so we've tried to help plan for that impact within this budget. Under financials and transfers, this was decreased due to the end of mortgages for properties. Again, so that's just where we're seeing some of that fluctuation coming from that ministry program delivery, as well as there were other changes in this area just due again to how the Ministry of Municipal Affairs money is actually rolled out when we go to service clients. Contribution to reserves, there were some additional capital repair costs that we've added to the properties for our community housing portfolio. So what you'll see there is money coming in to be able to help maintain those properties. So for revenue, I think I'll start with I think what this group will probably find as positive news. So we have changed the shared services agreement percentage. So as we've added units for example, for 559th Street, we also added 3 affordable housing property units from our 15 Edward property, and we also removed units that were previously held by Winchester Not-for-Profit because they came to the end of their mortgage, and we've actually put them under a rent supplement agreement, which shifts where they would fall in the shared services agreement model. We've been able to change the percentage to be 21.32% for the counties and 78.68% for the city. So that just reflects, as we add units to different communities, what that mix is starting to look like. In addition to this, I would just again remind that a large amount of our money does come from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, but that is primarily for the services delivered out of 340 Pitt Street. The funding at the provincial and federal levels is less robust for the actual delivery of community housing, and primarily out of there, the revenue that supports that area is tax base and rental revenue and other tenant charges. There is still some federal money that we do receive to help with community housing debenture payments, but as those mortgages end, that funding has significantly decreased historically and probably will continue to do so. The other change in revenue is just that we've had a full year of operation now at 559th Street, so you'll see a full year worth of rental revenue and tenant charges, as well as we've included 6 months worth of revenue for Morrisburg, again, just to be shown in that revenue profile. At this point, I could take a break to talk about the operational before we talk about capital, if that works for folks. Okay, so at this point, I'll take a brief break for any questions you may have.
So thank you for that presentation, Lisa. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I couldn't help but note as I was reading this, Lisa, a recurring phrase. You probably know the thing you wrote more than anything else. multiple areas that support employee development and other ongoing operational costs
Yes.
have been decreased. So, and this is and it's usually followed by the phrase, these expenses were removed to keep the charge to the tax base low. So I'm wondering, when that phrase occurs, and I think it's universal on all the reports, are you talking about entire services that people are going to miss? Or are we talking just about we're delivering 70% of what we used to do at 100% or something like that, just so we know where there could be pushback at some point?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there's actually no impact to client services in this budget. That employee development area is cuts we made to our training and development budgets. So just when we were looking at the cost realities, we had this budget year through consultation with Ms. Bailey and other members of the senior team, we have made a strategic choice to scale back on training and development for staff and only keep it to high priority or safety-based training.
Is this something that we're going to be catching up on, say, in the next budget, given that we've cut it back this time?
Yeah, I think I'll defer that to Ms. Bailey.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, you'll see across all city budgets, including the shared services budgets, to Ms. Smith's point, we have, in order to take some pressure off the tax base for both municipalities, lowered our training and development across all of our departments. We are hoping to reinstate that come the 2026 budget. We limited the training to be when certification is required, when there's a regulation and reason to go to that training. Of course, if a need presents itself, of course, we're flexible in that. But it was one avenue that we used, particularly in the 2025 budget, in order to reduce costs.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess the second part of my question would be, since in every case you address the tax base as the rationale for this, did you have a number in mind? Like, were you looking for a specific percentage to stay within, or what was your goal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our goal was to maintain service levels with a reasonable tax rate increase for our municipalities. And what we're seeing in the shared services areas, it's a pretty high increase when we take a look, especially in the budgets to come, for Glenstart Lodge and paramedic services. So there had to be some balancing across our budgets for that. City Council has a directive of 4%. It's not a goal that we're going to be able to achieve in our first round, so that budget will come to our council later this week. It'll be public, and what we're seeing through other municipalities is that they're seeing the same thing, the 6 to 8 to 9% increase on tax levy as a draft. Of course, council will take it from there.
Okay. Well, I'm very relieved that you note the fact that there's some cutting, obviously, been levied already. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor. Any further questions? I have one, just a question, maybe two questions. One is about the reserves and how they're being drawn down. Again, it sort of piggybacks to Councillor McDonald's question about when is there a plan to replenish those reserves in the future, and your thoughts on the impact that's going to have on the future budgets.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee, utilizing reserves in one budget year absolutely has an impact on future budget years. Number one, there's only so much money in reserves that municipalities hold, and once those funds are gone, they're gone until they're replenished. So in a subsequent budget year, you don't only not have those reserve dollars to use against your costs, but you're also trying to replenish your reserves. So we do take a look to ensure that we have a strategy in place to maintain the reserves. For paramedic services or land ambulance as an example, in every other year, the Ministry of Health has funded a budget the second year out. So there will be an increase in this budget year, but not hopefully in the next budget year. You'll see their reserve, we've used it for their capital. For community housing, we utilized reserves to offset the budget in this transition year. There's still $5.5 million in that reserve, though when you take a look at $5.5 million and the infrastructure we own for community housing, we do have to be cautious. We used, I think, about $85,000 or $95,000 from Children's Services Reserve. Those dollars came from the Ministry of Education many years ago of another program where we did not spend all of the funds, and the ministry said that we could keep them as long as we use them for children's services. That's a reserve we really shouldn't count on anyway. It probably wouldn't be replenished, but absolutely in a year where the dollars are not needed, that we budgeted for to come from reserves, we won't utilize them. So we don't have all of the information yet from the province of how these programs are going to be funded. And once we receive those notices, if they're different than what we have placed in the budget for revenue, then we'll definitely not utilize reserves. Like those other revenues will take care of that. But we do have to have a longer term strategy on reserve balances.
Thank you for that answer. I'm trying not. I don't want to be. I'm not being argumentative. But it's just your take on that as the treasurer, I believe. Yet, are we below, or are we below a critical level in the reserves funds? Will they be able to be? Is there enough reserve funds to do the things that they may have to do if there's a crisis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee, we do hold quite a bit of dollars in reserves with the city for shared services, specifically when the chief comes to speak about the budget. We're probably not putting enough money in reserves to continue our 10-year capital plan. So we'll need to look at that. We have always funded capital by a contribution to reserves and then funded our capital from that. It worked very well on a life cycle strategy. But what we're seeing with the cost of vehicles and other things that have hit that industry, we're not contributing enough to the reserve. It may mean that both municipalities will have to have a larger contribution to the reserve itself I would say in a budget year where we're not transitioning like we are in this year. Housing, with the $5.5 million, we've just completed building condition assessments. That will really inform our 10-year plan going forward. And so that asset management plan will come, it's part of the city's plan, and it'll have its own standalone plan. It'll come to the city before the end of the year. And we would have to put practices in place to understand those costs and have a long-term financial plan that meets the capital needs. There will be a gap.
Well, thank you for excuse me. Thank you for the answer, and I do appreciate your care and concern that you're taking in this matter. It's appreciated, especially in this economic climate of your care. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question really goes to community housing services, specifically housing programs. I know that the city had to respond to emergency situations with regards to homelessness encampments and getting people sheltered and finding accommodation and renovations and all the rest of it. And it's a bit of a mystery to me about exactly, these things, they come up, you have to deal with them, right? I get that. But I'm not clear on how the decision-making happens with regards to, okay, we've found this solution, which I'm assuming wasn't budgeted for, right? Is that the case? I mean, how can you budget something you don't know you're going to have to be dealing with? But I'll just finish, and then you can answer it. I'm not trying to be difficult. I honestly don't understand it. So, money got spent on a serious need in order to be able to put these people in shelter. But who made those decisions on, like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to handle, how we're going to handle it, and this is the amount of dollars that are going to be freed up to do it, and what the impact was going to be on shared services, because, of course, obviously, there's an impact there.
Through Mr. Chair. So at this time, we have been able to manage most of that responsiveness through the ministry funding. So with the ministry funding, what we're able to do is we can shift the funding to where it needs to go for the response. So we've been able to do that so far. Is that going to be sustainable in the future with the level of money we receive? Perhaps not. So we've been able to get pretty creative at this point, and be able to work within existing resources. But again, whether we can sustain that beyond potentially this budget year, that I'm not as clear on. That would be as well where our planning around the Massey Commons project, which we have discussed with both councils, would also be part of that solution. And again, we are budgeting and planning for that as part of future. But again, luckily that ministry money's been pretty flexible.
So you shifted it around. Well, that's a sensible thing to do. What was anything significant compromised as a result of that?
So again, through you, Mr. Chair. So what ends up happening is, like, we come up with rough plans, right, for that ministry funding. So we did have to shift out of money we were potentially going to put into domiciliary housing, but it again serves a very similar population. So again, this is kind of why I guess I would say, will that be sustainable as we move forward into future budget years? That may be less clear at this time, but we've been able to do it so far. So if that, I don't know if that directly answers, but yeah.
Any further questions before Ms. Smith goes further? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll move us into housing's capital submission. I'm not going to go through each capital project line by line. So what I will do is give you a high level, and then I'll break for questions again, just to see if you did have any questions on the capital projects we have planned. So the way the funding works for our capital is we have a legacy amount that we as a community agreed to continue to fund at the time of devolution in 2000, and that's 1.039 million roughly to go into capital repairs. What we've realized is that that's not completely sustainable. So what we've now started to do is, as we add new properties, we plan for a capital repair amount now in the budgets, and we do that based off of the legacy amount as applied to a percentage to each unit as what we anticipate would be the cost to repair it on an annual basis. Hopefully that makes sense as I explained that. So in this capital budget, there's a little bit of that funding now flowing in, for example, for 9th Street. We basically break out our capital projects into 4 key buckets. So there's interior, exterior, infrastructure, and grounds. We decide our capital projects on a mix of things. We look at the building condition assessments that Ms. Bailey referenced. We also look at just what we know is going on in terms of the buildings and what they need. So, when you build a BCA and an asset management plan, you might think you have to do this repair in 5 years, and then suddenly something breaks and you're repairing it next year, kind of thing, or you can see it needs earlier repair. So we balance priorities. The other thing we are looking at, for example, with our grounds work, is we just want to make sure that, again, where people live, it's pleasant, playgrounds are maintained, and all those positive things. So, again, we usually decide that based on what we can see happening within a property at any given time over the year. We actually have a very sophisticated capital and building maintenance team who are very accomplished in this area, who are excellent at helping plan this out. So again, it's a really robust process they go through as an annual process to build the budget. On that note, were there any questions on any of the individual capital projects for housing?
Yes, ma'am. Councillor.
Just a pretty simple question. At one point, you referenced the fridge sizes that you're replacing, but you mentioned that some of the older apartments can't handle a bigger fridge. So do you have a supply of smaller fridges, or are you going to be knocking walls out to accommodate a bigger fridge?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we still can get some supply for the smaller sizes, but they start to phase out. So what we'd probably more likely have to do is do some adjustment of cabinets and things like that. But again, we have a very strong team internally, and we can do most of that work usually ourselves.
Yeah. Lucky us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, it's more of a comment, really. I was pleased to see a lot of the projects involve energy efficiency upgrades. I think that's promising, and with those savings, it should help us as we move forward with further capital projects. So I think that was a positive that I saw coming out of this. So thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. It definitely is a commitment of our team that we know whatever energy efficiency we do in units also benefits tenants, right? So it helps keeps their costs down. It's a win-win, really, for us and the folks who live in our units. So thank you for that.
Councillor McGillis.
Thank you. Regarding the energy costs, are you going to take a measurement of the cost and look at the differences from year to year to see what the savings were?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are starting to look at how we conduct, for lack of a better term, energy audits to start to assess on all of our new builds. We can tell you what it would have been to build it without things like heat pumps and improved windows. We know roughly what that cost is. We are looking at how do we access grants through entities like FCM to be able to conduct those energy audits. With the appliances, we generally have a bit of an idea. We won't fully know because in some of the units, the tenants themselves pay those utility costs, but we usually more see it anecdotally, right? Less coming in, needing support and help, but we know it has, in that case, an impact. But for our own energy efficiency efforts, we usually can track, or we're looking into how we would.
Anything further for Ms. Smith? So you're ready to move on then, I guess, to Glen Stordon?
Yep, we can move on if everybody's in agreement. So Glen Stordon Lodge is a municipally operated long-term care facility with 132 beds. Within the lodge, we have other departments that support the long-term care needs of those individuals. So, you know, we have like a nursing area, programs and services, dietary, housekeeping, all of those important things to be able to have the lodge be as close to home for the folks who live there as possible. The other thing that our lodge has that I think is important to highlight is our outreach programs. So we are offering supports to seniors and adults, or individuals, I should say, with disabilities through things like Meals on Wheels, our Adult Day program, our crisis intervention and telephone reassurance program. So the lodge does a lot of outreach into our community. I'm not always sure that's always highlighted, so I just wanted to make sure that was noted. As we move into the budget, again, the salary and benefit line, there are changes you would see in there that are result from contractual obligations, but as you know, we did conduct a service delivery review of the lodge to look at how do we adequately staff the facility to be able to best support residents. There was a significant increase in employees that we made in 2024, and they have been primarily onboarded for the last quarter of this year. So large additions, for example, in PSW supports and other areas such as that. So 2025 will also include increases reflective of them when they were onboarded and when they might be due, for example, a step increase or a general wage increase. Under purchase of goods, increases in this area are a direct result of the inflation costs we're seeing on necessary supplies. Services and rents, there was an overall decrease in services and rents due to realignment of some expenses and decreased costs in some of our contracted services. However, we have increased our professional services category primarily to provide improved physiotherapy supports to residents. So again, that's in an attempt to be responsive to the care needs we're seeing for the individuals who reside with us. Under financials and transfers, the department continues to budget for technological upgrades and improvements so we can better support residents. So for example, I think it's as of today or as of the end of this month, all of our staff will now have corporate emails, which allows us to better communicate with staff and support them in their roles. Under financing, LTD principal and interest, there was an air handling unit that was purchased and completed in 2024, and it's our intention to borrow funds for that project. We also currently pay principal and interest for the generator replacement that was completed in 2023. Contribution to reserves, there was a previously recommended increase to start planning additional funds to be able to support the capital repairs needed at the lodge. So that's what you're seeing there. Again, under revenue, I think one of the key takeaways again for here is this facility is funded fairly robustly, again, by the Ministry of Health, and to be able to support the work that we're doing to support residents. There was some general increases to the ministry funding to help us support staffing and salaries. So that is one thing I think that is of benefit for the lodge, is that the ministry does help to offset our staffing costs so we can continue to serve residents. There was a slight decrease in resident revenue, and that just comes from trends we see depending on who's living with us, right? Maybe we have more individuals who are requiring a private room, maybe based on their income profile, their ability to support their own long-term care costs is less. So all of that just fluctuates basically depending on who we're working with at the time. The one thing I would note, though, is that we did previously receive United Way funding to help with our outreach programs, and that has been reduced in 2024. So we did not plan for that in 2025. Again, at this point, I can take a break for operational questions, and then we can have a quick discussion on capital for the lodge as well.
Thank you. Questions, comments? That's a short break.
Lets me catch my breath. So for our capital submission, same thing. I'm not going to go through project by project, but I will speak to it on a high level. What you can see is, again, our building requirements are planned out according to key categories of expenses. So you'll see a theme with housing. There's internal requirements, external, kitchen, laundry, nursing equipment, and things of that nature. You can also see in the submission the funding mix for those projects, and you can see it's a mix of Ministry of Health funding, building reserve, and other sources of revenue. Again, I, at this point, can take a break just if there are any questions on any of the planned capital projects. No? Okay, great.
Please go ahead.
I think I would just like to make a couple of comments for County Council, and long-term care resides quite often with our counterparts at the EOWC, so I can help with getting other information from other county levels. But if we look at the tax-based funding for the Glensterran Lodge, if my numbers are correct, it's a little over $7.1 million between the city and the county. And then we are looking at 132 beds. So when I do a quick calculation, it might not be absolutely accurate, but it's about $54,000 from the tax base per bed per year. And so I think that's a significant amount. I did inquire with a couple of other CAOs last week, and I think at other county long-term care homes, those numbers are climbing like they are in maybe not as high as ours, but in the you know, the $30,000-$40,000 range per bed per year. And that excludes capital, right? That's just the operating cost. I know that the EOWC treasurers are meeting tomorrow, and they're also going to talk about long-term care. But given how much this has changed over the last number of years, I can speak to my early days in the city of Cornwall, and Tracy would have been there as well. Like, the amount of tax-based funding that was going into long-term care was minimal, right? Like, it was, you know, I want to say it was a few $100,000 maybe the first year that I might have been with the city. So I'm not sure if there's, you know, there might be opportunity for me to try to get some additional information from other long-term care homes in Ontario. I know that we're all concerned about maintaining staffing levels and the costs for having to recruit from outside agencies to cover staffing. But I also think that, you know, this is something that has changed dramatically, and so we also might need to think about how we are messaging this from a tax-based perspective to our property owners, and whether or not we need to think about any future delegations with the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. So I kind of just wanted to put it in perspective, but I also wanted to, because I know it's a massive increase for the counties this year, so we are seeing quite a few areas impact our budgets, and this is certainly one of the biggest. But I think it's just important to highlight what's happening in the municipal sector.
Well, thank you for that, and I think I'd like to think I can speak on behalf of everyone here that the more information would support the how we deliver the information that's of the impact of Glen Store, Dunn Lodge, and of all the things that we're discussing today to the tax base. It is a message that I know from my role at lower tier council, we need to be able to deliver that message and to support the reasoning. It doesn't serve any of us well if we can't speak with confidence about the challenges that we face. So I look forward to that, Madam CAO, if that information could be provided. And it'd be interesting, though, to find out if from the EOWC treasurers, if these struggles we face are because of our rural nature and our ag community, and or are we unique, or the similar challenges being faced by all of the county-supported homes within Eastern Ontario. Is there anything that anyone would like to add?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could just add to CAO Adams' comment, the other reach out we can do too is we're part of a network of 47 service managers across the province, and I think it's a worthwhile question to put on our next leads meeting, just to talk about what they're also seeing, because again, I think it's just important to find out provincially what's happening with this, and if there's any advocacy to the CAO's comment from maybe organizations like AMO or even OMSA, which is the Municipal Social Services Association, to take forward as well. So that's a reach out I would be able to do as well.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, these other municipalities must be suffering the same thing. I mean, isn't most of this due to the 4 hours of care requirement?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would say it's the pressure to how do we adequately staff to be able to meet that, as well as just to adequately staff, because I think what we've all seen across all sectors of social services right now is increasing complexity of individuals and their needs. And I'd say housing isn't what it was 20 years ago, long-term care isn't as well. Like, it's just getting more complicated to be able to provide the level of service we need to for those accountabilities, but also just because we're offering a service and we got to make sure it's quality care. So I think that's a fair comment.
And of course, there's been no additional dollars come with this new requirement. So maybe an AMO is a place to go.
I think it's also important to highlight that we don't have control over who the residents are coming into the municipal home, so that is a decision made by the LIN. There is an acuity index, but I don't know that the acuity funding is really true to what the real cost is. So to Lisa's point, you know, if you look back at 15, 20 years ago at the Glenstoran Lodge, you probably had a more active, a little bit independent group of residents, and now people that are at the Glenstoran Lodge need a high level of care. And then that's also put a strain on resources and supports that are necessary for that facility.
Thank you, Madam CEO. That's it in totality, right? Thank you. Thank you both. At this point, we're going to move into having Chief Lister.
I saw the red button. So I'm here to present the proposed 2025 Cornwall SDNG paramedic budget. This year is a year that we've realized through lots of evidence that we've maxed out the staffing, and that will be the most significant change in the budget from 2024 to 2025. Reflected in the salaries and benefits. The evidence that supports that you've heard before. We're reaching level 0 at a rate that's making us very uncomfortable. Our offload and our end of shift is contributing significantly and weighing heavily on the medics. So the proposal is to increase the staffing by 1 full rotation, which is 8 full-time medics, which would run 24/7, 365 days of the year. To support them, we would need 2 supervisors. That would be direct road supervisors. Some of that is because of change in technology in the industry, and some of it is just the added support and the complexity of the decision-making that needs to happen. And then the third one is the difficulty in keeping our logistics, which includes vehicles and all the equipment that go with it, in line with maintenance and quality assurance. That's the most significant increase with the goal of maintaining what we've got. If we don't do this, we'll start falling behind. So it's kind of like a big shoe drop there. That's about a $1.6 million requirement to meet that staffing requirement. The rest of the budget is pretty much a reflection of what would be needed to either increase the staff or maintain what we currently have. So when you increase a vehicle, you increase mileage and so on, and that's all accounted for and reflected in the budget. The thing that is difficult to manage is the cost increase, and I wouldn't even call it inflationary because some of it's ridiculous. Like a 25% increase in the cost of an ambulance is not inflationary. It's well beyond that, well beyond the inflationary rates, which is mostly market driven, and from what we can get from the suppliers, it doesn't seem to be trending down. It seems to be standing and holding. So that's reflected in the budget. Drugs are another one that are a big concern. They're hugely expensive and very difficult to obtain. So just giving the drugs that we're supposed to give sometimes is a challenge in just getting the supply, just getting them in. So that's reflected in the budget. Tracy already mentioned the effect this will have on the contribution to reserves. we're withdrawing quicker than we're depositing, so our reserves are dwindling. The other aspect of the budget is we have to anticipate what the province will fund, remembering that the province funds 50, or approximately 50, more like 43% of the budget. And they don't give us any announcements ahead of time. We didn't receive the information until August of this year, so we anticipate on a best guess that they'll contribute somewhere about 5% on the revenue stream, which is reasonably consistent with what they've done in the past. So all that put together is the most significant variances in the 24 to 25 budget and the reasons why it needs to happen. I'll just carry on if that's okay. The capital contributions, all our replacement of equipment that's at end of life. The only additional thing which was included in the 10-year capital plan is a 10-year capital plan, exactly that. So what's the best way to utilize the ambulances? Where should our bases be? Those types of questions we're asking for assistance with. We have a really good route issue with it, a route understanding of the issue. The plan will kind of solidify what the growth rate should be over the next while and how to help manage that. Remembering in other ones, and we're not seeing a deflection from this at all, that our call volume growth is almost 5%. It's just slightly less than that. And our population growth is much less than that. So we're growing quicker. Our call volume is growing quicker than the population, and that's the underlying root issue on it. So that's our best efforts to meet that at this stage of the game. If you wish, I'll go line by line, but the capital is all there, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to.
I don't think it's necessary to go line by line, Chief, but questions, comments would be appreciated. So I'll lead off. With the increase of 8 paramedics, 2 supervisory staff, and then 1 logistic?
1 logistics, yes, correct.
And that's $1.6 million.
All rolled into
one
that. Big budget.
Maybe I missed it, and my apologies if I did. Are there 2 new rigs coming on board to support the 8, or to support that?
So we purchased an additional, not a new or a replacement, like an additional, and because it's so difficult to get an ambulance, we actually received it this year. So what you see in the budget is actually just replacement of existing ambulances, not an increase in the fleet. So it's we're going to have to kind of leapfrog. So we need the vehicle, and then we get the staff, and we kind of work in that pattern. We're hoping the study will help us do a planned growth on like how to organize our capital budget going forward, on how to manage the growth in the industry.
And thank you for that. So I have a feeling either through discussion with you years ago at your office, or hearing you speak here, or maybe in a different venue, but we all recognize that the demographic is aging, that the pressures are going to be higher. So this is going to be a study on determining what the forecasts of the aging demographic and the pressures are going to be to allow you capital. And is staff part of capital?
Staff. It's also what is reasonable is the response time. So our response time models are, it's a mandated key performance indicator through legislation. And we're actually doing quite well with it with the MPDS. But what's happening is it's just shifting. So where we were doing poorly before, we're doing better at, but where we were doing better now, we're doing poorly, and we're getting increasing complaints with things like interfacility transfers, allied agencies saying, where are you, we need you, and you know, we have nothing left to give them. So we're particularly worried at night as well. We've traditionally only staffed to the emergency coverage level, not to do interfacility transfers and so on. And we're quite behind on effective coverage on nights. But the study would help us determine that. Even things, we're getting pressures from the community saying, your traditional response time isn't sufficient. I mean, in not so many words. And we're realizing there's big problems in that. We are at base or in the geographic zone we're supposed to be in, and the travel distance is the thing that's, Winchester to Chesterville as an example, we're supposed to respond under 20 minutes, and we're not making it because we're too far. We only have one base in each county, and the city of Cornwall, which are between 20 and 25 minutes apart, and if you want a response time of 10 minutes or whatever the study would determine as reasonable, sustainable, we'd have to look at that as well. And those are quite substantial looks.
Thank you for that explanation, and I think I share it with everyone that we look forward to understanding better what the challenges going ahead are, because it's obvious that the challenges are going to increase and increase with their demographic aging and the demands and you know, the response times. Whenever we used to have conversations about the response times and the circles and the 80% of the time, 60% and all that, that might be tough to achieve. I'm sure it is. It's almost impossible to achieve, but we need to be able to express that, as we talked earlier, whenever we talk to our tax base, that these are the challenges that we face, and almost anything can be solved with more money. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. So through the chair to you, Chief, and you might not have this data right now. I'll wait for it, but I'd love to have it. For each of the bases, could you give us the range of what the response times are?
By base?
But you don't have to do that today.
Yeah, so just roughly so that it kind of puts your mind at ease. Each base is 25 minutes apart from the next base.
Right.
So if you live between two bases, your best response time you're going to get, if we're fully staffed, which means we could be fully staffed, just nobody's in the base because they're out doing a call.
Right.
Is the best we can do is probably 14 minutes.
Right.
I can get that for you though,
Okay.
if you wish.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Just to kind of back that off a little bit, if you're in a community near a hospital, you tend to get better response time because the ambulances go to the hospital, they leave empty, and it's not by base, it's by closest available vehicle.
Right.
So Cornwall, Winchester, and Alexandria tend to have a slightly better response times.
Okay.
Although we are most concerned about North Stormont and North Dundas on response times.
Okay, even though Winchester Hospital
Even though, we're there, but there's a lot of Winchester Springs,
right.
Chesterville, that type of thing, where our travel time is quite a distance.
Okay.
And no matter where we go from, it's 20 minutes to get there.
And then ambulances that get tied up at the hospital, say if you have to make a delivery of an individual to Ottawa, is that worse in the North Dundas area?
Winchester tends to pull towards Ottawa, whereas everything else in SDNG pulls towards Cornwall.
Okay.
The offload delays overall are actually getting better, but they're still in the hours. So we'll go into Ottawa and be 5 hours, 4
Wow.
hours. So we actually are monitoring how many times we go into Ottawa, how long we're taking, and what we're... So it's a universal address on purple calls, which is critical or time sensitive. and what happens to those ambulances when we leave. So actually yesterday we told the province that we're going to turn our radios off until we're back in our areas again. We're the only service left doing it, where we were responding to the closest call.
So I guess, yeah, and my other question would be, do you have a set number of vehicles at each base, or does that vary?
Yeah, so the only base that has more than one is Cornwall.
Okay.
Cornwall is headquarters, so all our spares and everything else are there, well, if they're there. So generally speaking, we run 4 out of Cornwall, 1 in all the rural areas.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about community paramedic program. In terms of what impact does it have on some of the challenges you were talking about just previously with volume and then, managing volume and response time and that kind of thing?
Thank you for the question. The reason it wasn't brought forward is, if you remember, this is 100% funded through the province, so we're running a program for the province, and this is there's many aspects of it, and to answer you directly, it takes about 800 calls off the backs of the ambulances, the trucks. We're not transporting that many people. So that's, I mean, in an emergency response answer, that's the benefit of them. In a community response, people are staying at home with less anxiety and healthier longer, which is a long-term care. I point to Lisa on that, because there is quite a challenge on getting people spaces. And part of the offload delay is exactly that, is that alternative care is being managed in the hospitals, occupying beds that, I mean, they're at 125% capacity, most hospitals. It's unheard of to hear anything less. So all of that put together, that's what community paramedics is benefiting. There's also a few spin-offs, like we're doing a lot of public health as well. So we do vaccinations, particularly this time of year. We aim at long-term care facilities, but if we can get the vaccines, we run clinics to the public and so on. We're also getting better at like public education on how to live healthy and long, mostly with complex things like congestive heart failure, or COPD. Those are the 2 big ones that tend to draw people into the hospital for longer. We're also implementing a new program starting February, where they discharge post-op patients to home and we manage them at home. It's a 3-day shortening of their stay in the hospital. This is mostly prostate cancers and below the belly button care kind of thing, which been piloted in other areas, and it's a huge success, which is falling under the CP program, and we're underway on that.
So there is some good news to this.
There is some good news.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McGillis.
Thank you. Can you just give us an idea if there was any thought put into getting more the cars for response time? Because the ambulances, we know that they increase the cost of purchasing a new ambulance. You said it increased 25%. The timeline to get one, I mean, if you purchase one, is probably over a year. So was there any thought about the cars? You see the odd car going around with 1 or 2 paramedics. I was wondering, was there any thought of maybe purchasing more cars, just so that we can get the response time, because we have up to 10 minutes for response in the event there's a heart attack.
Yeah. So we did that this year. We've already increased by 1 on the, we call them PRUs, but those are the SUV type ambulances. We're restricted under the Act, which is changing, but it's not available to us currently, that if you transport somebody, you're supposed to be transporting them as an emergency person that needs 1 to monitor the patient and 1 to drive the ambulance. It's not reality in that, some of the lower priority calls, we could manage just like a glorified taxi type thing. We pick them up and we keep an eye on them, but they don't need a stretcher and they don't need like intensive like IV starts or EKGs and stuff. different levels, right? So with this, with the MPDS, we're hoping once they get accreditation, we can start doing that lower levels call volume with other things, but currently we can't do that yet.
Further questions, comments for the chief?
Thank you.
Thank you, chief.
I don't think.
Are we at the end now?
Yep, sorry.
Ms. Russell, please. We weren't sure if we're going to let you up. We're just debating it.
Sorry. Last meeting, I did go through in detail all the budget items that were outlined. Today, unless the committee would like to discuss otherwise, I just highlighted the changes that were made since the last meeting, and they were very minor. I have not changed revenues or expected revenues for 2025 based on the standing of the trends we're experiencing with the reduced revenues. The Ministry of Attorney General is very delayed in getting information to us. Normally there's a 2-month lag, so as the year progresses, I may still be able to adjust the revenues up or down depending on what those numbers come in at. But as of right now, I did leave them as they are. I did revisit wages and benefits, and I did allocate a reduction to the wages and benefits based on an assumption of the cost of living being 2.5% when originally I estimated 3%, but the reality is it will likely be around 2.5%. So I did further reduce the wages by $16,289. There is also, as I mentioned in the last meeting, an inclusion for a junior prosecutor position that will assist with the increased demands of the administration of the court. The other change that I made was relating to software and equipment. In 2020, we purchased POA computers through the COVID funding. Those computers are all being at the end of their life and they will need to be renewed. So we were able to save money in 2020 and over the last couple of years, but the renewal for those computers is due. So we will be buying those in 2025, as well as a new receipt printer and swipe machine that works with Icon. So as you're aware, Icon is very dated. There's only so many types of equipment that work with this software, with that software. So we will be making sure that the receipt printer and swipe machine works with that system. I have reduced collection costs as well, another $5,000, based on the trend that we're seeing, and this I may still reduce it more as we get the information towards the end of the year. We have reduced fines. We're not collecting as much as we used to. I think it's reasonable to estimate a reduced costs in this area as well. But the changes in these expenses do change the allocation to the city. So the city's portion of revenue will go up and the county's portion will be an expense. So with those changes, the city portion goes up to $74,147, where previously it was $68,126. So that's really only the changes that I've made, but if anyone wants to discuss anything in particular.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Questions, comments? Thank you very much. There's no new business. The communication reports, none. So we'll move into adjournment. Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Towndale and Warden McDonald move and second the adjournment. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. A lot of tough news that we have to deliver and digest, But those are the times we live in. So thank you very much for your participation.